So, Bob, congratulations and thank you for finding the time to talk with me.
Well, thank you, Paul. I'm a big fan of the cancer letter, so I always enjoy reading it. And of course, a little unusual to be in it. I don't seek to make news, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today.
Well, we covered your coming to Pittsburgh or becoming the director in 2017. That was kind of fun. And to see you moving to North Carolina, these are two wonderful jobs. Why choose one over another?
Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure. I didn't know as much about the UNC job until the opportunity came up, even though I was an undergrad and did my college there. So it's a completely different aspect of the institution. And I think as I learned more about it, it became really increasingly intriguing. Of course, the search committee was chaired by Ned Sharpless, and I actually have a couple UNC folks on my EAB. So I had followed it over the years and, discovered a lot of unique aspects about the Lineberger position that were quite attractive. As much as I enjoyed the Hillman Cancer Center position and have for 7 years now. And, I'd put them into a few categories. One of them that's truly unique about the entire University of North Carolina, in the words of Charles Kuralt, it's the University of the people. And so the feeling of public service that permeates the entire UNC and the UNC health system as the state health system really brought back a lot of the memories from college 35 years ago of UNC feeling like it was, positioned. And one of the things I'll mention that's really attractive is the support from the state legislature. And great credit goes to them for the incredible investment in the Lineberger and in the UNC Comprehensive Cancer Center. Each year, there is a substantial investment that is intended, obviously, to improve the health and wellness, to lessen the burden of cancer across the whole state. And so envisioning that after 7 years of leading another comprehensive cancer center, I saw it almost as an opportunity to take things I've learned at one wonderful cancer center and take them to another state where there are disparities in cancer risk, disparities in cancer outcome, both racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic in terms of our rural areas, and have this tremendous investment by the state to do really special things. And so Lineberger was clearly a very balanced cancer center. It's tremendous in community outreach and engagement and population science. It's produced 2 NCI directors in Drs. Sharpless and Rathmel, before Kim moved to Vanderbilt. And, Dr. Earp, longstanding director, is been recently appointed to the NCI Council on Scientific Advisors. So the public service aspect of UNC is really attractive. And maybe one last thing that really pushed things over the top for me psychologically was UNC Health is completely committed to developing an integrated oncology service line and serving the citizens first of the Triangle and then across the entire state to provide the highest quality oncology care. And there are already great oncologists within UNC Health, but the opportunity to be chief of oncology services within the health system and across the state, and marry that with the tremendous academic prowess, the tremendous, external peer-reviewed funding, community outreach. It was one of those to come along in one's career at a place where, honestly, my daughter just graduated from college herself, and I attended, and it became irresistible.
So, just to do some cancer-centered baseball statistics, you are the first cancer center director at UNC who didn't come through the ranks at UNC. So you're the first outside director, even though, of course, you were an undergraduate there. And I should probably disclose that I was an undergraduate at a school on kind of down 15501. It's a rival school. We play basketball as well.
Is that NC Central or NC State?
No.
we get along despite that, Paul. That just shows our friendship, that we can still get along.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so that's wonderful. But seriously, you're the first director to come in not through the ranks of UNC, your first outside candidate. It's kind of fascinating.
Well, I think one aspect that kind of converged was being a part of the oncology service line in Pittsburgh, which is one of the aspects of our cancer center at the UPMC Hillman. And the feeling that someone with that exposure and experience and understanding how to bring all of the different modalities in our US healthcare system, the way oncology funds flow and need to be integrated to truly build and strengthen care delivery in terms of quality and financial viability, and then find ways to reinvest that both in the academics and clinical research and clinical trials. I think that the UPMC Hillman experience that I had accumulated over 7 years was attractive, but I know there were outstanding candidates internally. And so that's, why it's particularly special. And it's my job now to partner with all of those wonderful people within the walls of Lineberger and build the team going forward.
So you're like number 4 or number 5 director of UNC, depending on how many times you count Shelley.
Yeah, right.
You should count him twice.
He did it twice.
So,
that's right.
So how does your job at University of Pittsburgh differ from this job? And how does it actually differ also from Shelley's job?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you do that?
So University of Pittsburgh does get some state support for the undergraduate, but essentially it's a not-for-profit health system and essentially a private university and medical school. The medical school and university are obviously outstanding and highly funded. UNC is the state university and state health system. So, I think the mission to serve the community exists at both places, but perhaps coming from slightly different directions. And our medical school and cancer center don't receive really nearly as much support from the legislature, for instance, although we have had some programs like our community cancer centers and an occasional research project, looking at fracking and cancer exposures. But those tend to be one-offs. Whereas, in the state legislature budget each year in North Carolina is a strong investment that I think was until recently tied to the tobacco funds and was recently put into the general funds to make it more stable. And with that comes a commitment to the state and to the citizens. For over 4 decades, my family has had a house in the mountains of Western North Carolina. And so, it's a state that we love, but that we've seen has, real challenges in health disparities and in access. So I'd say they differ a bit in the strength of support from the legislature, even though, the Pennsylvania one has been supportive, but I think it takes it to a new level at Lineberger, what Dr. Earp and the other folks have been able to do, the chancellor of the university, the CEO and dean of the health system, Dr. Wesley Burks. They have solidified this support for Lineberger, and that's one of the attractive things is the obligation and the privilege to then deploy those funds back to improve the citizenry. And I will take to it a lot of commonalities with the large cancer network that Hillman has in Pittsburgh, but being able to turn the clock back maybe 10 years or 15 years and be able to build it a bit more, from an intermediate stage to a much more integrated status. So, one is a bit ahead of the other in terms of the, state support, but with UPMC's clinical success, it's been able to build a tremendous cancer network. And I've had 7 years primarily seeing the onboarding and participating in central Pennsylvania, which is an area UPMC has not penetrated as much as Western PA.
And your role in the health system is different from Shelley's role with the health system. And how does that compare with your role in the health system at Pittsburgh?
The new director was for, as I was told by the leadership at UNC, for the so-called right candidate would include the opportunity to be chief of the oncology service line and oncology services. So kind of a dual employment at UNC as well as UNC Health. That duality is becoming the norm across the country. I sit on Committee A of the NCI and do site visits, and I'm seeing that to be quite common. In fact, that's I think a really positive development across the country. It takes the right expertise. I'm a practicing head and neck surgical oncologist. I think that's an important aspect to build oncology. And I would say at Pittsburgh, I didn't initiate the Cancer Network. I participated in a co-management type role, and about a year ago was given more responsibilities and named a senior vice president for oncology. But, in truth, I had not built it. And so the appealing aspect to go to a health system where it was being newly integrated and to have an academic vision as the director, as well as to have a foot within the hospital system and work hand in glove, managing both and an operational and quality and, a co-management from a financial standpoint. That was something that I think Dr. Earp had not done, that none of the prior directors had really done, not because they weren't capable, obviously, but because the health system had not fully committed to doing it.
How large is that health system outside Chapel Hill, outside the campus?
So there are a series of owned practices. Primarily, they exist at Rex Hospital in Raleigh. There are some other community practices. But the primary one is at Rex, a very high quality group that I've met with and have begun working with. The goal, of course, is to build it and integrate it even more, all of the UNC Health owned facilities. And of course, there are some other joint ventures, which, will be down the line. But starting really first with the Research Triangle, which is, unlike the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, undergone a tremendous population growth. So that's another feature, is to sort of keep up with the growth and influx in the population, and of course then the cancer incidence of that population.
Yeah, and you must have gotten quite a dowry too. What can you tell me about it?
Well, I would say that the state is extremely generous. That makes the Lineberger director a key collaborator with many folks across the matrix environment of an outstanding university that has a wonderful medical school, pharmacy school, one of the world's great schools of public health, a dental school, nursing. And so the Lineberger director gets to partner and deploy resources to build cancer prevention, community outreach, education and training, as well as basic translational and clinical research. So the state is tremendously generous, and that's on the order of $60 million a year. And so that's, comes with an expectation that one is devoted to the citizens of the state. And I take that very seriously, that privilege. This is new for the health system to invest in the cancer center per se, but this is a re-envisioned cancer center that has a clinical oncology service aspect to it. And so the leadership of the health system is adding resources to build the oncology service line. And I will be tasked with bringing together the leaders, not just of the typical departments in the medical school, but the leaders of the oncology community physicians as well across the triangle and eventually the state. So there are additional resources in addition to the typical, academic investments that the existing cancer center Lineberger leadership that will really need to be deployed to build, the scope of oncology services, as well as to monitor the quality and the finances to ensure that its financial viability and its ability to grow across the state and serve the citizens.
It's really interesting that eventually every cancer center director starts getting taken for granted. So if you stay, you get the resources that are not, large increment increases or even decreases. So it's probably good for the system to have some of that kind of musical chairs and the churns.
Well, I was very fortunate, even though I was an internal candidate when I got the job 7 years ago, the UPMC Hillman Cancer Center is a highly successful clinical entity, and it's invested substantially. The support. I said this when I recruited folks. If you come to UPMC, it's not like money's growing on trees, but in general, you're not going to have a need and a want that a good idea can't be resourced. If you're successful and you deliver, in my 23 years there, which part of the reason I stayed is because a good idea would generally find its way, to the surface and get resourced. Obviously, UNC is a little bit of a different system. It's more substantial resources because of the state investment, but it's just, a different way around it. I can tell you assuredly that was not at all any of the, reason to go looking, because it is disruptive at a cancer center where one is recruiting and retaining and building other people's careers. That's really the primary negative of this whole process, is leaving people behind who I've committed, myself to. So one would or should never do that for a few dollars of support. Hopefully the institution values what the contributions of the existing director, and it's really the most troubling aspect, is having to sit, face to face with people I've recruited and tell them I'm leaving. It's been really agonizing.
Yeah. What about the grant deadlines for both Pitt and NCI? How does that look?
They're not too dissimilar. We are just beginning our 2-year merit extension in Pittsburgh. So the nice thing is both institutions are highly funded and quite meritorious, and both qualify for the 2-year merit extension that began a couple of years ago. So UPMC will go in the fall of 2016, a little over 2 years from now. UNC Lineberger is about a cycle or so later, so about 2.5 years. So it's a tight time frame, really, at either job. I'd say proud, perhaps, is the word to say, that the leadership of UPMC Hillman is phenomenal. We had been growing some new leaders and recently appointing them. The NCI and other cancer relevant peer-reviewed funding is up, 40+% over the past several years since our last site visit. The clinical trial accruals are up substantially and just recently exceeded the number that was reported at our 2020 site visit. It was the last in-person site visit before COVID, by the way. So we've recovered from all the staffing issues. We've got a tremendous team at Hillman. So I know they're going to find an amazing, exceptional director, and I feel like they're well positioned. So this was a time that I didn't think would jeopardize them too much.
Yeah, I'm not worried about them. I'm sure they'll do well. So some more baseball statistics. Are you the only cancer center director who's a head and neck surgeon now? There used to be two.
Yeah, that's right. I believe there's 4 or 5 surgeons. You've got Steve Leach at Dartmouth. You've got Rich Schulich in Colorado, Steve Labuti at Rutgers, myself. Kunle Odunsi is a gynecologic surgeon. So I don't want to leave anybody out. Rafe Pollock at Ohio State. That's exactly right. Yep. Yeah, we had dinner just a few months ago. So yeah, Rafe's a good friend. So I don't know that there are many others, 5 or 6 surgeons, but none other that do head and neck.
That's pretty cool. One other thing, immunotherapy. I mean, you started the immunotherapy program, or certainly beefed it up, at University of Pittsburgh. I'm not thinking of UNC as the number 1 or 2 place in immunotherapy, although it's an absolutely terrific place. What does your coming there mean in terms of immunotherapy?
Well, I should point out that in their strategic plan, in the plan that guides the deployment of the University Cancer Research Fund, the support from the legislature, immunology and immunotherapy is one of the pillars. On the other hand, UNC was one of the key drivers and coordinators of the Cancer Genome Atlas, TCGA. And so genomics and transcriptomics with luminaries like Chuck Peru and others may give you that impression. But there are amazing folks doing innate immunity, antiviral immunity. They have a great cancer virology group. Innate immunity, Dr. Jenny Ting, and then both Blossom and Dirk and the virology group. So I think there is tremendous interest and expertise in immunology, and I see that as an area of growth that I can bring. And the folks not just doing basic, but also applied and translational immunology, immunotherapy. And I come to it, as a surgeon with the concept of neoadjuvant trials. And so engaging all of the clinical teams and bringing that to bear on the field of immunotherapy, I see that as an area of opportunity. So one wouldn't necessarily want to move someplace where everything is already fully formed and developed. On the other hand, I would say when I took the job in Pittsburgh, the dean at the time, Art Levine, said, it's not the Hillman Immunotherapy Center, it's the Hillman Cancer Center. And so I don't want to go to Lineberger giving the impression that, immunotherapy is the only entity that's going to get investment. Absolutely not. But I certainly will carry the banner and want to include some recruitments. But genomics and transcriptomics is so pivotal to immunotherapy these days that I see a lot of synergies.
I'm just remembering a conversation we had maybe 7 years ago, where I think you were part of your dowry was a couple $100 million for immunotherapy program. So this was no small thing. And is there something similar happening?
I would say this, I feel like what we leave behind in Pittsburgh is tremendous strengths, and I'm extremely proud of them. But, in one's mid-50s, you feel like you've got another 10 years to do a similar thing at another major university, major matrixed cancer center, and being able to link that into the oncology clinical arena. Immunotherapy is the fourth modality. So the funding at Lineberger is substantial and will enable us, I think, with some other strategies to expand the pie to ensure that we don't have to take away from the existing strengths in order to add the immunotherapy leg to that stool. And honestly, that's what a modern comprehensive cancer center and oncology network needs to do. Immunotherapy is here to stay, and I will support it, but not hopefully at the expense of other things.
I remember actually from that conversation 7 years ago, you said that it's really important in immunotherapy to have a center director who understands immunotherapy. You can't just hire someone to do it, like you can hire, whatever. But is that still how you feel? I mean, it's obviously who you are, but is that how you feel?
I would say 2016 and 17 was a little bit different time where immunotherapy was still having to convince some of the skeptics. But I would also say we've hit some speed bumps along the way where some supposedly, obvious clinical trials turned out to be negative. And so being able to integrate immunotherapy into the traditional modalities, either before surgery or before and during and after radiation and or different chemotherapies, I do think there is a unique contribution that a practicing immunotherapy individual can bring as director, but it's going to take some recruitments, bringing some expertise to Chapel Hill. So I think that it's a time for the field to make its next great leap forward. Pure immunologists, immunotherapists need to collaborate with the genomic and transcriptomic folks for novel target discovery, understanding resistance. So I've probably learned a lot myself as an immunotherapy person during the last 8 or 10 years of its success, and trying to figure out how to get out of the minority response levels and make it really much more beneficial. I think the immunologists can't just be talking to each other. So moving to a place like Lineberger enables cross-disciplinary strategies so immunotherapy can get better You need immunotherapy expertise, but you also need the other fields and disciplines as well.
And I understand this is a twofer recruitment for UNC.
Well, I'm blessed to have an outstanding spouse who herself had turned down department chair jobs. She's a dermatologist, an MD, PhD, physician scientist, and she had turned those down in the past. And by pure coincidence, the chair job in UNC dermatology was open. So she competed for it completely independently, of course. And we were just incredibly blessed to have both opportunities at the same time, which really doesn't happen very often. And it happened as our last child graduated from high school, making us newly mobile since we hadn't been for the entire time we were in Pittsburgh. So it seemed like the moons really lined up.
That's so great. What happens to the SPOREs? Do they stay? Do they go?
So we're really blessed in Pittsburgh to have 3 active SPOREs. Melanoma and skin cancer will need to be renewed and ends in 2026. So they'll start working on that. The head and neck one, of which I co-direct, we had worked already. I've just learned years ago to plan for every eventuality. And we had written into our multi-PI plan, if either PI had left, then we would give the opportunity to carry that portion and run it as a 2-institution SPORE. When Dr. Jennifer Grandis left UPMC, she and I co-led the SPORE with her at UCSF. So I have some experience with that. And so I'll continue, co-directing that until 2027. Dr. Yarbrough, the chair of otolaryngology, is part of the Yale SPORE. So there'll be a little bit of thought that goes into head and neck SPOREs going forward. And I've been in contact with Dr. Barbara Burtness to be sure that, in the spirit of the SPORE program, that we're really focusing all of those resources, both intellectual, financial, et cetera, and pilots to really build head and neck cancer translational and clinical impact. But we will have to look at, the renewals. But otherwise, the SPOREs in Pittsburgh stay there. And UNC has a pancreas SPORE as well as as of last week, a newly renewed breast SPORE. So great credit to the breast team of Drs. Earp, Lisa Carey, and others.
That's fantastic. Are you worried about the political climate right now because the TEI and you can and cannot use and the culture?
Yeah, I think whatever state we're in, I think there is a recognition that the realities of the law and following the law and advocating and changing the law, if we don't agree with it, exist in several states across the country. So I do think the NCI, particularly with regard to the plan to enhance diversity, or what they may be calling it, plan to enhance diverse perspectives, I've heard various different things, is a recognition that the ultimate goal of broadening our workforce, developing the next generation of the highest quality leaders from all backgrounds. And even though my family has been in this country for a few generations, we still feel like immigrants and are tremendously grateful for every opportunity we've had. And I want to have a cancer center that is reflective of that same spirit. I have talked a bit with some of the leadership, and I feel like everybody's on the same page that in the end, the highest quality individuals need to be given every opportunity to succeed. And sometimes, some additional support as it becomes, available, or I would say additional, thought to expand the pie. And I think that's the biggest issue is to not make this a zero sum between folks, but to create opportunities so everybody can grow and 1,000 flowers bloom.
Is the NCI funding making you sleep less soundly?
Absolutely. I certainly wouldn't want to be in Congress. Cancer Center director is a tremendous job. I wouldn't want to have to, manage the budgets as they do. But I hope they recognize that a total NIH budget of, $35 billion, an NCI budget of 8.5 or 9 billion is really paltry, given the returns on investment of human health, of different, commercial drugs and therapies. So in my view, obviously I'm biased, it's money well spent. It's difficult on the institutional side to be constantly filling gaps with, budgets that get trimmed or come in at 90 or 95%. And I know the program, the NIH and the program officers and the NCI are agonized over choices they're having to make to ensure that we keep the enterprise going. And institutionally, that means that directors need to be more creative with revenue streams that come from commercial collaborations, from philanthropic sources, and articulate that we've got to bridge that gap because it doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon.
Is there anything I forgot to ask?
Oh, gosh. Oh, you're always so good. I think we touched on a lot. I guess I would just say, that having done a job at a similar sized place, I'm thinking a lot about team building and about the culture. And I plan to do a lot of listening and not expecting the culture at UNC to automatically translate from one that I've, that's become second nature to me after 23 years at UPMC in the University of Pittsburgh. So I find that refreshing. The quality of the individuals there, my phone's blown up with welcomes, personal calls. Both my wife and I feel extremely welcomed at UNC. So I know that first 100 days is going to be just learning the culture, listening, and, creating partnerships. So I really look forward to that. And it will be exhilarating, even though it will be exhausting.
Well, thank you very much for finding the time to talk with me.
Thank you, Paul. It's always a pleasure.